Good afternoon. We're back with more Marvel Snap, and today will be a tier list for the Series 4 and Series 5 cards. Currently, we get Series 4 or Series 5 cards either in Spotlight caches or with Collector's tokens. Collector's token acquisition is quite low at the moment, which makes buying decisions with those tokens very important. The other method, Spotlight caches, we have to save up our collector's keys and then use them in weeks when the cards are available that we want, which makes those very important as well. So we're going to go over each Series 4 and each Series 5 card and give recommendations about which ones are the important ones to buy, save up for, and which ones you can let go, or which ones maybe are useful but kind of niche. The S tier will be must buys, the A's will be good but not necessarily the highest priority. B's will be pretty niche cards that you can let go most of the time and save them until after you've gotten the A or S tier cards. C tier cards will be okay, not going to want to buy too many of those. D tier and F tier cards are going to be really only for collectors. So let's get started. We're just going to go Series 4 cards first in alphabetical order. And first up is Darkhawk. Darkhawk, currently a 4/0 with the ability +2 power for each card in your opponent's deck. This has been, since its inception, one of the best cards in the game. It remains so today. It would be my top pick for the highest priority buy in the Series 4. Very, very strong card. It is used in the Darkhawk archetype as well as in Mr. Negative, though Mr. Negative has fallen out of favor. And so mainly you'll see it in Darkhawk decks along with Werewolf, or sometimes now you'll see it with Annihilus. But even just a Darkhawk archetype all by itself with Darkhawk and the Darkhawk supporting cards remains a very strong deck, and so Darkhawk's going in the S tier. A top priority buy, and given that it costs 3,000 tokens, it may be the highest priority buy with tokens, though you could certainly make a case for High Evolutionary. Next up we have Null. Null is used in the Destroy archetype. Destroy with X23 is in a decent place. I would not buy Null before you buy X23 though. I don't know that there's that much point in building out the Destroy archetype if you don't have X23, and X23 is the harder card to get given that it is a Series 5 card. So if you've already got X23 and you want to make a really good Destroy deck, you'll probably need Null as well. It's a solid card. It's only really used in Destroy though at the moment. I used it in my Mr. Negative deck a little bit, but that was months and months ago, and Mr. Negative is terrible now. So it's really only used in Destroy now, and it's not the best card in Destroy. It's going in the A tier. It's not going to be a top priority buy until after you have X23, who's a higher priority. And I don't know that I would necessarily focus on it without X23. But if you've already got X23, Null is an important card in the Destroy archetype. Its ability, it has the combined power of all cards destroyed this game by either you or your opponent, which is a very strong ability at times, and at times it's kind of meh. But outside of the Destroy archetype, this card is unplayable. So this will be a buy for players who really want to make a Destroy deck and already have X23. Destroy is not my favorite archetype. It's not one that I would really recommend focusing on because there's not much room for innovation. It's kind of a solved deck. The best list is a pretty standard deck list, and there's not much room to innovate there. I would say that's similar to Discard. So it isn't my favorite because I don't think the skill ceiling is very high. Now that being said, for more casual players it may be a good deck to build. But my recommendation for the top decks to focus on would be something like High Evolutionary. Or after that, Werewolf decks are good. Werewolf Loki, Werewolf Darkhawk. Possibly even a Nihilus or Eliath based decks. Destroy would come fairly low down the list. Not because it's not strong, it's a good 58 to 60% winner. There just isn't really any ceiling or any room for it to go higher than that. So it's not an archetype that I focus much attention on. But it is strong. And if you've already got X23 and you want to build Destroy, Null will be one of the next cards you'll get. Next up we have Legion. Card with costs 5, has 7 power, and has the on reveal ability to replace each other location with this one. So it can be a location fixer. You can do some gimmicky stuff with magic. It's a niche card. There are 1 or 2 decks where it really works well in. Wouldn't put it as a high priority buy though. We're going to put Legion in the B tier. It does have a niche, and it's a card that you won't necessarily be sad to get if you pull it out of a random draw in the spotlight caches, but neither is it a card that I would focus on over some of the others in the list. Like, if you heard a player telling you to prioritize Legion over like Eliath or Annihilus or Loki, Werewolf, I would say that's ludicrous. Legion is nowhere near that tier of card. It's a nice card to have. It's a fun card in certain decks, but not an important one to focus on at all. I wouldn't spend spotlight keys to acquire it, and I wouldn't spend tokens to acquire it unless you've gotten all of the other important Series 4 and Series 5 cards from the S and A tiers. Fun card though, and does have some niche uses that are pretty cool, with fixing locations or potentially doing some gimmicky plays with magic, where you make the opponent think the game is ending on turn 7, and then you fix it back to 6. But you can do that with Scarlet Witch as well. So I think this is a niche card. Next up we have MODOK. MODOK, a very important card to the discard archetype. 5 cost, 8 power, on reveal, discard your hand. In the discard archetype, he does elevate that deck. He's pretty important to playing a competitive discard deck. Now, discard I would categorize similar to destroy. I think discard is a little bit better right now, but it is essentially a solved deck. There's not a lot of room to innovate, and so for casual players that's probably fine if you don't have a lot of time to dedicate to really playing the hard to play decks. Destroy or discard will be great decks for you. They'll enable you to get to infinite each season if you build them out and acquire the rewards, but they're not gonna really be the deck you want to focus on to get to high infinite, though I think it is possible for discard or destroy specialists. But it's an A or a B tier deck as opposed to S tier decks that you may want to focus on. So MODOK is going in the A tier. It's going above Null because I do think discard is a little bit better than destroy right now, though they are close. And MODOK is very important to playing discard. But it's not going in the S tier because the decks that I've mentioned already that are better than destroy are also better than discard. Next up we have Man-Thing. Man-Thing costs 4, has 5 power, and has the ongoing ability, 1, 2, and 3 cost cards here have -2 power. I would say the most common scenario for Man-Thing is to go on a lane with maybe 2 opposing 1 or 2 or 3 cost cards, which would bump Man-Thing up to like a 4/9, which is pretty strong. It doesn't come anywhere near Miss Marvel's 4/15, but it's pretty strong. This is a nice card. I think this is an underrated card. as far as tokens go, I would put this card in the S tier, but it would be a lower S tier. So he's not going to be a higher priority buy than Darkhawk, but he's a card that you could buy and put in a lot of decks. There's really a lot of decks where Man-Thing is good. He doesn't enable any new archetypes like Darkhawk does. You're not going to base your entire deck around this card like you do with Darkhawk. But he is a very nice card that you can put in a lot of decks, and he will elevate the deck's win rate by a couple of percentage points, 1 to 3 percentage points, by including this card over another average 4-drop. I like the card, and I think it's underrated. For 3,000 tokens, it's a solid buy. Now, there are going to be S tier cards that you'll want to buy first that are going to cost 6,000, so it's going to end up being in the lower S tier. There's only 2 cards in the S tier at the moment, but when all is said and done, it's going to be lower S tier. So, not super high priority, but I would pick it up before MODOK or Null because, well, this card, Destroy, they're not decks I'd recommend focusing on if you're serious about Marvel Snap. And I think Man-Thing is going to work in more serious decks because he gets Zabu's discount. He's a control card and works in a lot of decks. It's a very solid card. Next up we have Martyr. Martyr was recently released. Costs 1, has 4 power, and the ability at the end of the game, move to a location that loses you the game, if possible. So 4 power is a little bit above average, but not a lot. There are a few 1-drops that can get that high in value. One of the biggest being Nebula, and another prominent one being Sunspot. And this card is terrible. I mean, I can't imagine recommending that anyone buy this card. It's going in the F tier. Even for collectors, I'd put it as a pretty low priority buy. So, it's in the Spotlight caches right now. This is November 30th, 2023. I don't recommend it for anyone. Not good. Not a good card. Master Mold. Master Mold is a 2 cost, 2 power, and on reveal adds 2 Sentinels to your opponent's hand. So he pairs well with Ronan the Accuser, who gains power for each card in your opponent's hand. Those Sentinels are impossible for your opponent to get rid of. He can play them, but they just generate more Sentinels. This is a card that I liked a little bit, maybe 4 or 5 months ago when it first came out. It was featured in I used it in a Sentinel Viper Master Mold Ronin deck that did alright. It's not terrible, but it certainly isn't good either. And I mean, it's going in the D tier for now. There may exist a meta in which Master Mold makes more sense in the future if any Ronin decks come back in, but outside of that happening, this is not a good card. It's certainly not a high priority buy compared to cards like Darkhawk, Man-Thing, MODOK, Null. Those are going to be the cards you'll want to focus on over Master Mold. At best, he's really like an annoyance right now. He pairs decently with Ronin, but Ronin's not in the meta at the moment and hasn't been for quite a while. Mirage. Mirage has 2 cost, 2 power. On reveal, copy the lowest cost card in your opponent's hand into your hand and give it plus 2 power, which basically gives you a 2/4, which is not bad, but it's nothing exceptional either. Now, the generating the extra card does have value, so I think Mirage is a little underrated. And does have some use in meta decks. He's good with collector decks. It is a 2-drop that I would actually include in a collector deck. And so I'm going to put Mirage in the low A tier because the Darkheart or the Loki collector werewolf deck is so big in the meta right now. Mirage is good in that deck. It's an on-reveal for werewolf, and it adds a power to the collector. It adds a card to your hand, gives you information about your opponent's hand, and it's essentially a 2/4 if you do end up playing the card that you generate. That's solid. That's very solid, and I think the stats for the win rate back up this rating. It's a low A tier card. It's pretty good. I think it's underrated. You almost never see it, but I do think it's pretty good. I played it a bit myself because I got it when I was buying Spotlight caches. For some reason, when I returned to the game, I decided to buy caches during the Gladiator cache week, which was foolish. And I did pick up Mirage then and played it a bit, and it's not bad. I think it's a pretty solid card and an underrated card. Similar to Man-Thing, you don't see it much, but I think it's very solid. Now, wouldn't really recommend it before MODOK or Null unless you don't care about discard or destroy. If you're trying to make the best possible collector werewolf Loki deck, Mirage will be one of the last cards you pick up, but you probably will want to pick it up to make the absolute best deck possible. But it's not going to be a high priority. Mobius, card you rarely see now. Mobius has 3 cost, 3 power, and ongoing effect. Your costs can't be increased. Your opponent's costs can't be reduced. So it's good against Loki. It's good against Zabu. Ravonna, Quinjet. Ravonna doesn't get played a lot. Quinjet does. All those are going to be fairly decent against Mobius, but it does mean you can't play cost reduction yourself. And most elite decks do want to play cost reduction. He's not bad. All that being said, he's not bad. He does have some uses. Now, he's not a 2/3 like you see in this little tiny thumbnail anymore. He's since been nerfed to a 3/3. Nonetheless, he's still okay. He would be very strong at 2/3. At 3/3, we're going to put him in the niche category. Certainly not a high priority buy, but he can be a nice solid card if you do accidentally pick him up. But not one that I'd really recommend spending tokens on or Spotlight keys. Next up is Negasonic Teenage Warhead, a card that was relatively recently buffed. Negasonic has 3 cost, 2 power, and the ability after an enemy card is played here, destroy it once per game. Played against an interesting Jean Grey Negasonic Echo deck in a Conquest match once. Negasonic you don't see much in the meta. Now, how big of a card do you have to destroy for Negasonic to be good? I'd say 4 power card. And given that she costs 3, that's not unlikely. However, if you don't destroy a card on the turn that you play her, the enemy gets to decide which card gets destroyed. And then all they have to do is play like a 1 cost card and then a 3 cost card on their turn 4, and you've basically destroyed very little. So, Negasonic, she's underrated. I am going to put her in the A tier, even higher than Mirage. I think she's underutilized and underrated. But definitely not going to be in the S tier, and not going to be in the A tier above MODOK or Null. The decks that she makes sense in, probably the Destroy deck makes the most sense. But she does actually get used as a supporting player in a variety of decks, Darkhawk, Lockdown, and so forth. So it's not a high priority buy, but if you're filling out a deck and you've got extra tokens or Spotlight keys to spare, It's not a bad card. I wouldn't recommend it before you've got all the high priority ones, but it's not a bad card. I do think Negasonic is underrated. Another underrated card. Maybe even more underrated than Mirage. A card you almost never see, but it is a nice supporting card in a variety of decks. Lockdown being one of the ones that makes the most sense. It's like a mini Eliath. Really mini, but it's not as bad as it seems. When you play the game, you really never see her, and that kind of leads to the impression that she's not very good, but I do think she's a nice card. Not a card to focus on before you've got the other high priority ones, but a pretty nice card. Nimrod. There used to be some pretty decent Nimrod decks. I played one myself a bit with like Black Panther and some other destroy effects. Arnim Zola was the primary one. However, Nimrod has since completely fallen out of the meta. He's down to not quite dirt tier, but he's going to be in the D tier. It's going to be a very low priority buy. He doesn't even really work well in Destroy, and the primary Destroy decks that you see don't use him. I don't think this card is good. It was a fun card 4 or 5 months ago in 1 or 2 niche decks. That's about it. Even at 5/6 instead of 5/5, it's still not very good, and not a card that you need to focus on acquiring. Even if you really like Destroy decks, I wouldn't grab this card. Renslayer, relatively recently released. She is a cost reduction card. 2 cost 1 power. Your cards with 1 or less power cost 1 less, minimum 1. So they learned from their past mistakes with Quinjet. Quinjet didn't used to say minimum 1, it used to have no minimum. Renslayer has a minimum of 1. Renslayer is going in the C tier. Now, with the caveat that cost reduction cards, they're always going to be cards that you'll want to keep in mind when you're deck building. The thing about Renslayer is that this niche of cards with 1 or less cost, right now at this moment I would say you need to run 3 or 4 cards that she works on, probably 4 or more, that can get discounted with Renslayer in order to play her. Maybe even a little bit more than that. I think Renslayer makes more sense at 2/2. Which would make her similar to Zabu. Zabu works on more cards, I would say, a wider variety of cards, and he has more power. So I'd like Renslayer a lot more at 2/2. I think she'd be pretty good at 2/2. At 2/1, she's a little bit too weak. If she was 2/2, she'd move up to B, maybe even A tier. At 2/1, she's going in the C tier, but with the caveat that as more 1 or 0 power cards enter the game, she may improve. And I would bet that at some point there's going to be a pretty strong deck that plays Renslayer. Right now, though, she's not a very high priority buy. I'd put her fairly low down the list. And I've seen people messing around with her a bit and doing okay. But Zabu is the card you want if you're going for a 2 cost reduction card. And would you ever play Zabu and Renslayer? That wouldn't make sense. I don't think you would do that, at least not right now. There are decks where you can make Renslayer work. It's just that deck, the best deck for Renslayer is really Darkhawk, and Zabu works on Darkhawk. Because Darkhawk is the best 0 or 1 power card. And you play Zabu, and would you ever play Zabu and Renslayer? Probably not. So, Renslayer is not the best card in her niche, but there does exist a scenario in the future where she could be elevated to the A or S tier. Right now, though, not a high priority card. Not a high priority card is going to be a fairly common theme in the Series 4 cards. The really high priority ones are mostly going to be in Series 5. We're taking a look at the Series 4 ones first. Snow Guard, 1 cost, 2 power. On reveal, add the Hawk and Bear Auroras to your hand. Here is the Bear Aurora. It's a 3 cost, 4 power card that triggers the effect of the location it's played at. And then you have the Hawk, which is a 3/3 that ignores all location abilities everywhere until the end of the next turn, or the game, whichever comes first. It's not bad. It works well with the collector. It adds value to your hand that can help you smooth out resource curves, and you will occasionally get some use out of the abilities that it gives you. I'm putting it above the Mirage and below Negasonic Teenage Warhead. I think Snow Guard really only sees play in collector decks. And so if you go ahead and buy this card, now the collector decks are very strong right now. The issue is that if you go ahead and buy Snow Guard and buy Mirage, because they're good in the collector decks, and then the collector decks ever get nerfed, or Loki ever gets nerfed, which is not unlikely because they're pretty prominent in the meta, your Snow Guard and Mirage aren't going to be good anymore because they really don't see play outside of those decks. Negasonic right now can see play in a wide variety of decks. Maybe a bit controversial to rank her over Snow Guard or Mirage, but I think she's more versatile because I do anticipate at some point the Loki collector deck will get nerfed and then Snow Guard and Mirage will fall further out of the meta than they already are. I don't really see Snow Guard outside of collector decks. Negasonic I don't really see at all, but she's only just recently been buffed and people haven't really had a chance to acquire her yet because I'm not sure she's been in a spotlight cache since she got buffed. Expect I'll see her more in the future. I expect she's just overlooked right now. But the Snow Guard, it's pretty good, but not super high priority to get. Unless you really want to make the best collector Loki werewolf deck that you can right now, and that deck is really, really good. Just running the risk that it may get nerfed. Werewolf seems kind of overtuned at the moment, may get nerfed, in which case your Snow Guard's going to get worse. Next up, Spider-Ham. Spider-Ham's okay. He's one of the okayest cards in the game. I would put him in the B tier. He's a relatively niche, but he does work in almost any deck. You could stick Spider-Ham in there, and he's going to do stuff for you. He's certainly not essential to get, though. He's not the best one-drop. He's not really close to that. I wouldn't say he's top 2. Probably would run Nico over him in most decks. But if you don't have Nico or you don't have Nebula, you could run Spider-Ham. So he's very, very okay. If you looked up okay in the dictionary, I'd expect to see a picture of Spider-Ham. It's not going to be something you need to prioritize. It's not going to be a card that you really need to make any kind of specific deck. But a nice card to have, I guess. A nice card to have. There's not much more I can say about him. He's okay. He's fine. He's serviceable. Spider-Man 2099. There's no deck that really works well with Spider-Man 2099 at the moment. Move isn't in that good of a spot. Even in Move, it's not easy to make 2099 work. He's going in the F tier. I'd put him ahead of Martyr, but this isn't going to be a card that you need to spend tokens on or spotlight keys. He's in the caches right now. This is a skip week. He just isn't very good. There's other cards that are better in movement decks, and movement decks themselves are not very good. Stature. Stature was once quite prominent in the meta and has since fallen out of favor after she got nerfed, but she's still not a bad card, and she's going to go in the B tier. She really needs to be paired with Black Bolt to work, although Silver Samurai can work as well. Potentially Gambit. Just looking at decks that have stature there, but we'll bring her card back up. She costs 1 if your opponent discarded a card from their hand this game. And the ways to make your opponent do that would be Black Bolt, Silver Samurai. Those would probably be the biggest. Are those the only ones? There might be one more that I'm missing, but you almost never see her unless she's paired with Blackhawk in the deck. And she used to be a 5/7. After getting nerfed, she's fallen out of the meta. With Black Bolt, you pay 6, you get 14 in stats. That's okay, but you usually get that just from Hulk with, or you get more than that with Hulk from High Evolutionary. So Stature's just been kind of outpowered, and she's okay now. Nothing special, okay. The B tier also contains Mobius, who's also been nerfed. Cards that would have been higher before their nerfs, but now in their nerfed form are just okay and not very high priority cards to go out and get. Stegron. Stegron's 4 cost, 5 power. On reveal, move an enemy card from here to another location. There's really no deck where Stegron makes sense at the moment. I would put him in the F tier. It's a random enemy card. Would you ever run Stegron over Juggernaut? Nah. And would you play both of them? I don't know. If you're trolling, sure. But yeah, I don't think this is a good card. Wouldn't recommend it for anybody. Even as a control card, there's better cards. So, don't buy, except for collectors. And finally, for the Series 4 cards, we've got Zabu. Zabu is very good. Zabu is going in the S tier, and he is going above Man-Thing. Ever since his release, well, he used to discount 4 cost cards by 2, which was just ridiculous. Now it's only 1. Even though it's only 1, he's still quite good. And anytime you've got a deck that runs 4 cost cards, I'd say, you can run Zabu. And he's going to do very well for you. I use him in a lot of decks. He's one of my go-to cost reduction cards. Very strong card. I'd prioritize it over Man-Thing, but less than Darkhawk. He is among the essential cards that you'll need to make some decks in this game. And very, very solid. Always has been. Ever since his release. That's it for the Series 4 cards. We got 3 must-buys. Darkhawk, Zabu, Man-Thing coming in last. And then a fair selection of A tier cards, depending on which deck you're trying to make. Modok for discard, Null for destroy, Negasonic for a variety of different control decks. Snowguard and Mirage for collector decks. And then after that, if you got all those, you might even prioritize one or two of the niche cards over some of the A tier cards, depending on your personal preferences. For example, Spider-Ham maybe could be prioritized over A tier cards if you're not trying to make any of those specific decks. As control cards go, would you rather have Negasonic or Spider-Ham? I'd probably want Negasonic, but you can make a case for Spider-Ham as well. And then after that, you got cards that once were good but aren't anymore. Could be good in the future, like Ravonna, but aren't now. And then you got the garbage tier. So let's move on to the Series 5 cards. Just go in alphabetical order. First up is Alioth. Alioth is very, very strong. It's not going to be as high a priority as Darkhawk, but he's really good. He's really, really good. He gets used in lockdown decks. He gets used in Galactus decks. There actually aren't that many decks where he really doesn't work. He's Just a strong, good all-purpose card that's going to be used in a lot of control decks. He'll get you a lot of cubes because people usually don't play around him unless they know your specific deck list really well. So he catches people off guard, destroys their plans. Very, very solid card. Got him lower than Darkhawk, but he's going to be a very high priority card. He's going to be in the top 5 or so in the game. Maybe he's top 6. Very strong card. 6 cost, 3 power, destroys all enemy cards played here this turn, including unrevealed. So if you have priority, he'll destroy your opponent's cards before they have a chance to trigger their unreveal abilities, which is really, really good. So he just flat out wins the location you play him to pretty much, which is why he gets played in lockdown so much. Next up we have Annihilus, a relatively new addition. Annihilus is very good. Annihilus is going in the S tier. I think you could argue about whether Man-Thing is actually better overall, but Annihilus does enable an archetype. Annihilus brings the Sentry Junk deck back into the archetype, back into the meta, so I'd probably rank him higher than Man-Thing. It's 5 cost, 7 power. On reveal, your cards with 0 or less power switch sides. If they can't, because the opposite side is clogged, they get destroyed. So when combined with Sentry, what you get for 9 cost is 17 power, which is okay, but not great. But if it makes the Sentry Void switch sides, then you get 27 power for 9 cost, which is very good. Very, very good. Now, Annihilus isn't at the top of the meta because the times that you only get 17 for your 9 cost, it's meh. You'd like 3-to-1 power to cost to say something's exceptional. 2-to-1 is good. Anything less than that is kind of meh, and that's what you get for Annihilus if you can't make Sentry Void switch sides. Annihilus also gets played in Galactus decks, where you can clog up your opponent's side of the board and free up your locations, where you can then play Galactus. Which is nasty, but it's not super effective. It's like a 55 to 58% winner, which is definitely above average, but it's not like meta defining. It'd be like a B or a low A tier deck. The Annihilus decks overall, like Annihilus Darkhawk's pretty solid. Wins over 60%, just slightly over 60. But it's not going to be as high priority a craft as Darkhawk is. Still, he's a good card. And it's going to be in the top 10 cards in the game at the moment. In Series 4 and 5, anyway. Next up, we have Black Knight. I'll be honest, I have never seen Black Knight played before in a game. Costs 1, he has 2 power. After you discard a card, add the Ebony Blade to your hand with that card's power. The Ebony Blade is a 4-cost card with 0 power. So to make the Black Knight good, you'd really have to discard a card of 8 power or more, at least. So maybe in some Hela decks, but Hela's not good in the meta. It's fun, but not good. Black Knight's going in the F tier. You can do without this card for a long time. Might even be worse than Martyr. It's arguable. It's just not a good card. It's not one to spend 6,000 tokens on. It's not one to spend Spotlight caches on. There are many, many, many better options for that. Say no to Black Knight. You won't regret it. Dakin. Dakin is 3 cost, 4 power, and he adds the Muramasa Shard to your hand. And the Muramasa Shard, when it's discarded or destroyed, doubles Dakin's power. So you get a 3/8 which is more than 2 to 1, and it's almost 3 to 1. Very solid card for a discard deck. Does it work for a destroy deck? Not really, because you have to spend 1. You really want to discard this out of your hand to get the most value. If you discard it out of your hand, then you've got a 3/8, potentially a 3/8 that also buffs your Morbius. But if you have to spend 1 more to get this on the board and then destroy it, then you're really looking at a 4/8, and that's not as good. So you don't see this as much in destroy decks, but you do see it in discard decks. It's a nice piece in a discard deck. It is not as important as MODOK, but I would say it goes higher than B tier. It goes low A tier. If you really want to make the best discard deck possible and you've already got MODOK, you can pick up Dakin as well. Similar to like X23 and Null. You pick up X23 first, then you pick up Null. With the discard, you pick up MODOK first, then you pick up Dakin. I've already said my piece on discard and destroy. They're good decks. Not S tier decks, but they're good decks. They're A tier decks. And if you're trying to build out discard, MODOK and Dakin will be top priority buys with your tokens. Next up we have Echo. Echo's okay. Well, Miss Marvel is prominent in the meta right now, and Echo counters her. You can put Echo mid lane. I saw an interesting deck with Jean Grey and Negasonic and Echo that was really annoying to deal with in a Conquest match, but I've never seen it on the ladder, and it requires a lot of high cost cards to play. I suspect the result is not going to be worth the effort that it takes to put the deck together. But it's okay. It's a decent control card. It's not one you need to focus on. It's going to go in the B tier. Higher up in the B tier, perhaps. You could argue about whether Stature or Echo should be higher. But there are many other cards to focus on before Echo. I wish it was better. Like the Jean Grey deck with Echo, with Negasonic, it doesn't need a lot to get there. It's close, but it does need something. And so right now that'd be like a fun deck to play, an annoying deck to play against. But you'd need like Jean Grey, you need Echo, you need Negasonic Teenage Warhead, you probably need Eliath, you probably need Jeff. That's a lot of cards that you need to play that deck. Cool lockdown deck, annoying to play against, expensive to build, and probably not worth the payoff. And outside of decks like that, Echo, it's not a card you need to spend 6,000 on right now. Or use Spotlight Keys on. I wouldn't spend 6,000 or use a Spotlight Key on anything lower than an A tier. And I'd only spend it on the A tier if you want to build that specific deck type out. And you've already got the other pieces from the S tier, if there are any. Elsa Bloodstone. Better when she first came out. Elsa has since been nerfed. She's a 2/2. If you play another card to fill a location, give it +2. You'd really need to do that at least twice to make Elsa good. Make her a 2/6 at least. Right now, Elsa's not that great. The archetype that she works best in is like Bounce, that wants to fill a lot of locations. It's not real good at the moment. Elsa's gonna go in the niche tier, maybe high B. But it's a fun deck to play, but it's not a particularly effective one. It has been in the past. Bounce has been good in the past. It might be again in the future at some point. Not at the moment though. Elsa's not a card you need to focus on. Galactus has been very annoying in the past. Unfortunately, a card I purchased with tokens, regretted it, would rather have Thanos, would rather have Iron Lad, would rather have a variety of other cards, but I did buy this one 4 or 5 months ago. He's currently a 6 power 5 or 6 cost 5 power card. On reveal, if you're winning this location and this is your only card here, destroy all other locations. He has fallen out of popularity to the extent that he can now win 8 cube games because players don't expect him. You do kind of need a Nihilus to make the best possible Galactus deck at the moment. Without a Nihilus, you can't really make a good Galactus deck. If you are playing a Nihilus, Galactus Annihilus is not even the best version of Annihilus. So Galactus is currently going to go in the B tier. And he's going to be lower down the B tier as well. Maybe even C tier. He probably does belong in the C tier. We'll put him above Renslayer, but he's nothing special. He's a niche card that you play for fun. Not very good, because when he was good, he was too good, and he really killed the fun in the game. So he probably will never be good again for that reason. He'll never be terrible. He was originally, when they were going to do series drops, they said Galactus, Kang, and Thanos were all going to be permanently Series 5. Now it turns out there's other cards that have been permanently Series 5. Jeff has been Series 5 and Iron Lad for like 5 months, so who knows what the situation's going to be in the future. Galactus used to be a high priority buy because he was one of only 3 cards that you were never going to be able to get from Series 3, but now that plan has changed. There are a variety of permanent Series 5 cards. Galactus is not one of those that are worth buying. He's a low-tier niche card. He's been good in the past, and I suppose he could be good in the future, but I really don't think they'll make him good in the future because he kind of kills the fun when he is good. Ghost Spider. It's a fun card. 1 cost 2 power. On reveal, the last card you played moves here to the location where you played Ghost Spider. Ghost Spider is also going in the C tier, above Renslayer. She's fun. She's very niche. Very, very niche. She maybe makes sense in a deck with like Vulture, Human Torch. But other than that, she really isn't good. Move is not in a good spot right now. It never really has been. And so Ghost Spider isn't a card that needs to be prioritized. Gladiator, a card that I have. Gladiator is just not very good. Gladiator is going in the C tier, along with Ghost Spider, going lower down than Nirvana Renslayer. I picked him up from Spotlight caches before I really understood the Spotlight cache system. I should have saved my Spotlight caches for the Annihilus week. I didn't. I regret it. Gladiator's not very strong. I've played him a little bit. He's barely better than the average 3-drop, if he is at all. Even in a Destroy deck where he adds power to Null, he's really not that good. Definitely not a must-have for a good Destroy deck. If you do have him and you're playing Destroy, would you even include him? I guess. Maybe he adds like half a percentage point to your win rate. Maybe. Would be the most generous thing you can say about Gladiator. So, not a card I'd recommend anyone buy. You'll play him if you pick him up accidentally, but that's about it. High Evolutionary, an exceptional card. High Evolutionary is currently, in my opinion, the best card in the game. The card I would most recommend buying for new players because you don't really even need to buy anything other than High Evolutionary and then take the cards that you get as your starter cards or that you can get from Series 3 and you can get to Infinite. And you can get High Infinite even. That's how good High Evolutionary is. So you don't see him necessarily on pro player streams a lot. His deck doesn't have the highest skill ceiling, but he is getting my highest recommendation in terms of cards to buy. Even though High Evolutionary is not the best deck in the game, I'm ranking him as the best card for players to buy because it's the easiest deck to build that's really strong. All you really need to buy is High Evolutionary. So he's going at the very top of the S tier. It's a very, very strong card. He unlocks the potential of your cards with no abilities. So there are 7 of those, the ones you typically see the most. Misty Knight will grant a power to one other card if you have unspent energy. Shocker gives you -1. Cost to the leftmost card in your hand. Cyclops zaps 2 cards at his location for -1 power each if you have unspent energy. Hulk gains +2 power if you have unspent energy. Abomination gets cost reduction for each opponent's card that's been zapped with negative power, which synergizes with Cyclops. Thing gives 3 different cards at the same location -1 power. And Wasp gives 1 card -1 power. So they all synergize with debuffing opponents' cards or with unspent energy. And Cyclops and Hulk are the best ones. They are really, really strong. High Evolutionary I played a lot this season as my card collection was pretty out of date since I hadn't played since July, and I played High Evolutionary all the way up to Infinite, where I entered Infinite at rank 22,000, and then I played down to rank 7,000 or so, which is pretty good progress considering I started the month midway through the month, maybe 2 weeks ago, at rank 13. Not Infinite rank 13, just rank 13, because I haven't played in 5 months. High Evolutionary is very good and highly recommended for newer players as one of the first cards that you buy. Been around for a while, probably not getting nerfed. Remains as strong as he was when he entered the game, when he was meta defining, and he's still really, really good. Hit Monkey was once quite good. He's now a 3 cost, 2 power, on reveal, gain +2 power for each other card you played this turn. He's good in bounce. Bounce isn't that good anymore. Hit Monkey's going in the C tier. He's going a little bit higher than Gladiator, but nothing more than that. And nothing that anybody really needs to worry about. If you pick him up accidentally, you probably won't even play him unless you're playing a fun deck. He was good when he was like a 2-0 and a 3-2. Yeah, I don't know, he's fun, but he's just not that good. He's fallen out of the meta. Howard the Duck. 1 cost, 2 power, ongoing. Tap this to see the top card of your deck. He's terrible. No need to buy him. Doesn't feature prominently in any deck. He's a fun card only. Nothing much to see here. Going from that to Iron Lad. Iron Lad is really, really good. Iron Lad I would put ahead of Alioth, behind Darkhawk. Iron Lad is very good in Darkhawk decks. He's really a plug-and-play card. He can add win rate to almost any deck that you want to play Iron Lad in. Now, some more than others. There are a few decks where he doesn't work that well. But almost any deck, Iron Lad works really well in. And features in a couple of the best decks in the game. Really, really strong card. I'd buy Darkhawk first. If you're not going to go the High Evolutionary route, Iron Lad after Darkhawk makes sense. Well, maybe Werewolf will come before then, but Iron Lad's really, really good. I like that card a lot. It's a 4/6 that copies the text of your deck's top card. There's a lot of RNG involved in that, but in some decks, any card that you copy is good. Iron Lad, very, very strong. Sad that he hasn't dropped out of Series 5 yet. Jean Grey, currently in Spotlight Caches, a 3/3. Ongoing players must play their first card here each turn if possible. It's too bad it's not just your opponent that has to do that. She synergizes with cards like Echo, Negasonic, Jeff. Tough to play around. Currently not very strong. Not very strong at all. She's going in the D tier. Upper D tier. I'd like her to be strong. I like the card in concept, but in execution she just doesn't work. She can kind of work with a lot of other expensive cards involved. And that would be fun to play, but not especially effective. Though I have lost to it in conquest matches. Jeff. It's kind of an innocuous seeming card. A 2/3, you can move this once. Nothing can stop you from moving or playing this to any location. So he can be added to the professor's location. He goes to some very hard to reach locations. Jeff is just really, really solid all around. Even more so than Iron Lad. If you're not going the high evolutionary route, Jeff's going to be a very high priority buy, and he's just going to win you games. He can be added to any deck, basically, and he'll add percentage points to your win rate. Probably makes the most sense in Lockdown with the Professor, but doesn't have to be. I'd consider him in pretty much any deck. So a high priority buy from tokens or from Spotlight Caches. It's a really good card because of his versatility. Kang. Kang was a card that I liked a lot at one point. It really helps you to farm bots. I'll say that about Kang. The problem is that once you get up to infinity, he's not very useful. Doesn't do much for you against players. He is good against bots though, so if you want to climb more efficiently, Kang in certain decks does make a lot of sense. So I'm not going to put him in the F tier, but he is going in the D tier because there's a lot of other cards that I'd recommend first. I did buy Kang back when we thought that Kang, Galactus, and Thanos were going to be the only permanent Series 5 cards. So I bought Kang and Galactus, and then I was going to grab Thanos. I regret getting Galactus and Kang. I would have grabbed probably Jeff and Iron Lad if I'd known they were going to never move down from Series 5. But at the time we thought that they would, and so I planned accordingly. Now, with the benefit of hindsight and knowing the collection system, Kang's going in the D tier. He has 5 cost, 0 power, and you get to look at what your opponent did, then restart the turn, which is great, but it also means they can make different decisions, and you can end up kind of outplaying yourself with Kang. But he's really, really good against bots, and can help you get 8 cubes from bots when you would have gotten 4 or 2 or even surrendered. So, for the ladder climb, Kang can be useful. But I wouldn't recommend spending 6,000 tokens on him. I would recommend High Evolutionary, Jeff, Iron Lad, Elias, and Eyeless, all of those before Kang. Kitty Pryde. Kitty Pryde has 1 cost, 0 power, and when this returns to your hand, +1 power, and returns at the start of each turn. Kitty Pryde is not bad. She gets featured in some decks. She's going in kind of the higher A tier. I'd really never play her over Nebula, though. And so, how many decks do you play 2 1-cost cards in? There's a few. Would you play Kitty Pryde over Nico? Nico works in more types of decks, I think. So, Kitty's kind of fallen out of favor. I think players had higher hopes for her, but the developers couldn't get her to work as they originally programmed her. She was super, super buggy on release. Eventually, they gave her away for free to all players who were playing at the time. She's never been that good since, at least not to my knowledge. And maybe there was a time with the old beast where bounce was better, but so I shouldn't say she's never been that good, but it's been a while. And now, I think probably lower down the A tier is fine for Kitty Pryde. I'd craft Snowguard or Mirage or Dakin before Kitty. I don't think she's that important right now because bounce isn't that good. If bounce gets better, you can make a case for Kitty Pryde. Now she does add 1 power to Collector, and when she returns to your hand, and for that reason you could maybe see playing her. But I really don't think she's essential, and I'd rather have Snowguard. I'd probably even rather have Mirage than Kitty for a Collector deck. Lady Deathstrike. It's a 5-cost, 4-power card. On reveal, destroy each card here with less power than this. I actually think this is underrated. But not that underrated. Based on the number of times I've seen her, I'd say players might suspect she's a D or F tier card. I think she's a C tier card. Lower down the C tier. Even less than Gladiator in terms of her importance in a destroy deck. She can make some plays, though, in a destroy deck. She can definitely make some plays. Follow her up with Null, or follow her up, get those last few kills that you need to get Death down to a 0. I'd play her in a destroy deck if I had her. Lady Deathstrike and Gladiator, sure. Yep, I'd play them both in a destroy deck. And maybe that's how you separate yourself as a destroy player, but it's not a high priority card. Loki. Loki has been amazing since his inception. I do think he's a little bit overrated. He's going in the S tier, but I'd put him just a little bit over Annihilus. If you're going to play Loki and you don't plan on playing Werewolf, I don't think Loki without Werewolf is that good right now. That's why I say he's overrated. I think with Werewolf he is exceptional, with Werewolf and Collector. Especially if you have Snowguard and maybe Mirage as well. But if you don't have Werewolf, I don't think Loki is that good. I played him a bunch, wasn't that impressed without Werewolf. So I would put Werewolf as the higher priority buy in that deck. If you've already got Werewolf, Loki is a good pickup. And that deck, Loki Werewolf, is really, really, really strong. But without Werewolf, no. And if you're going to go for High Evolutionary or Loki, High Evolutionary. That archetype is complete with just the purchase of High Evolutionary. Nebula. Nebula is, in my opinion, the best 1-drop in the game. Nebula is going in the S tier. Nebula is going ahead of Zabu. Really, really strong card. Card well worth crafting. I wouldn't craft her ahead of Zabu if you're playing Darkhawk. I wouldn't craft her ahead of Loki if you're playing Loki Werewolf. But otherwise, she gets a really high priority craft, being the best 1-drop in the game in my opinion. Each turn your opponent doesn't play a card here, plus 2 power, except the turn you play this, 1/1. Really, really strong card. Was once a Battle Pass card. Now, 5 or 6k tokens. Maybe she'll get dropped in series at some point if they ever do that again. But I'm not holding my breath. Nico Minoru. 1 cost, 2 power. On reveal, after you play your next card, cast a spell. There are a variety of spell options. They rotate every turn. After you play your next card, it becomes a demon. After you play your next card, destroy it and draw 2 cards. After you play your next card, move it 1 location to the right. After you play your next card, give it plus 2 power. After you play your next card, replace that card's location. After you play your next card, add a copy of it to your hand. After you play your next card, double this card's power. All those are pretty good. I think Nico probably works the best in Destroy, but it's a good solid card. And one of the best one-drops in the game in the right context. Nico is going in the S tier. Below Nebula. Higher than Zabu. But again, don't prioritize it over Zabu if you're playing Darkhawk. And don't prioritize it over Loki if you're playing Werewolf. And don't prioritize it over Annihilus if you want to play Darkhawk Annihilus or Galactus Annihilus or something like that. But it's an all-rounder card that works in a lot of different types of decks. Phoenix Force. 4 cost, 5 power. On reveal, revive one of your destroyed cards and merge with it. That card can move each turn. So it's like a hybrid between a destroy and merge, or destroy and move deck, which in practice just doesn't work that well. This card is going in the D tier. Roughly the same as Nimrod, I'd say. No one needs to worry about crafting this, except for collectors. Silk. Silk works at best, in my opinion, in Cerebro 5s. Silk is underrated. Silk is pretty good. Enables Miles Morales. Unpredictable, can get to hard to reach locations with a decent amount of power. Silk is going in the high A tier. I like that card. Cerebro 5s. It's an A tier deck. It's up there with Discard, Destroy. You could argue that it's lower than Discard or Destroy. It's probably the best of the Web Slinger movement cards. But there are other cards you'll want to craft first, so it's a card that you craft if you're going for that specific deck, like the Cerebro 5s or maybe the like Miles Morales type deck. Apart from that, you can leave Silk alone and go after Snowguard or Mirage or Dakin or whatever deck you're trying to build out. Silver Samurai. 4 cost, 5 power. Each player discards the lowest power card from their hand. So it's a discard card. Works with Stature. It's not that good. Stature's not that good. If Stature was still 7 power, it'd be better. It's going in the C tier. It's going higher than Ravonna, but it's really not that good. It's not essential to playing a good discard deck, certainly. The Silver Samurai Black Bolt Stature deck, very meh. It's underpowered currently, and so I wouldn't recommend this as a high priority craft or using Spotlight keys on it. Thanos. Thanos was once a big dog in the meta. He's since fallen down to, I would say, mediocrity, maybe mediocrity plus. So put Thanos above Galactus, but in the low B tier. He's, I still see a Thanos deck every now and then, but it's pretty rare. Don't really see any of the big bads anymore. Thanos, Galactus, Kang. And he's not a high priority to get any longer. He's still fun, but not a high priority. See him from time to time. See him more often than Galactus or Kang. But not a high priority. Go for Jeff, Darkhawk, Iron Lad, Eliath, those types of cards. And you can leave Thanos alone. Living Tribunal, a fun idea for a card. A 6/9, split your total power evenly among all locations. In practice, though, I guess the deck that works best with would probably be Hela, and Hela's not that good. And so Living Tribunal is going in the D tier. I guess higher than Nimrod, but card you can leave alone. No need to try to acquire that one. Next up we have Miss Marvel, the current Battle Pass card as of November 30th. 4 cost 5 power, adjacent locations where your cards have unique costs at plus 5 power, an exceptional card among the very best cards in the game at the moment. I would rank her even higher than Jeff, with the caveat that she was just released, may get nerfed. Is way too strong for her cost. 15 power for 4 cost. It can be Enchantress or Rogue, but it should be 12, I think. So it should be 4 power and gives 4 power to adjacent locations. Even then it'd be quite good. 15 power for 4 cost is utterly ridiculous. Absurd. So currently the highest priority cards in the game. I'd put her just even higher than Darkhawk, just below High Evolutionary, because you can make a High Evolutionary deck, then you can make an ongoing deck with literally like just Miss Marvel and then other basic cards that you have already if you're new to the game. So as Miss Marvel currently stands, very, very high priority craft, with the caveat that she may get nerfed because she is overtuned. So watch out for that if you're going to craft her after the battle pass is over for this month. Werewolf. Werewolf is also an exceptional card. I would rank Werewolf even higher than Darkhawk. And then if you grab Werewolf, we want to grab Darkhawk after that, or Loki, whatever your preference is. Another card that might get nerfed, we'll see, but it's really, really good and enables a couple of different type decks that are strong. So I'd rank this card third best in the game at the moment. Really, really good card. It's a 3/3, and after you play an unrevealed card at another location, move there and gain +2 power. In the right deck, it's not uncommon to see him get up to 9, 10, or 9, 11, 13 power. Really, really good card. Finally, X-23. 1 cost, 2 power. When this is discarded or destroyed, regenerate it at a random location, and you get +1 energy next turn. Very strong card. Going in the S tier. If you want to play Destroy, this is the first card I'd pick up before Null. It's a really, really important card for Destroy. I've already given my opinion about Destroy, but if you do want to play it, X-23 would be the first card that I craft. That I would craft. It's really, really important to Destroy. That's our tier list for Series 4 and Series 5 as of November 30th, 2023. For newer players, High Evolutionary or Miss Marvel will be the cards you want to build around. And after that, you want to build into Werewolf Darkhawk or Werewolf Loki, or potentially a lockdown or just kind of good cards deck with Jeff, Iron Lad, Goliath. Nebula and Nico are going to be nice additions. Zabu is an important card for the Darkhawk deck, and Nihilus is fun and pretty strong. It's a little bit below Werewolf. It's a little bit below Loki. Werewolf Loki or Werewolf Darkhawk. And then you got Man-Thing, kind of the bottom of the S tier. And then in the A tier, you got the Discard Destroy cards, along with some supporting cards for collector decks. 1 move card in Silk or 1 Cerebro 5 card. And then after that, you've got cards that you can really do without. Most of the A tier cards you can do without as well. S tier cards, those are the cards you're going to build around. So that's all for now, and thank you for watching.